So tonight is a talk on the experimental archaeology processing of animal skins and the Clonbrin Shield. We have amazing Dr. Sally Herriett. Thank you very much for coming here.
Okay, right. So first slide.
Take it away.
Okie dokie. So I always put this warning up. Many of these slides contain images of animal remains. You know, the title said skin processing, but I always like to double check and make sure everybody is happy with that. So introduction first off, so a quick start with the sort of explanation of my experimental archaeology journey and how I ended up processing animal skins. I started some 35 years ago as a historical reenactor, and this quickly morphed into living history, working with the likes of English Heritage. And then that I started to make stuff. So I'm a historical clothing, I make historical clothing and stuff like that. And my interest developed and history widened, and I needed to understand history from both an academic and a practical side as being a maker. And then this obviously resulted in an increased focus on the material culture that remains in the archaeological record. And then as part of that interest, I found out that Truro College, in connection with Plymouth University, ran a foundation degree in archaeology, and then this expanded into the BSc for all 3 years. So I found I could take the degree course at Truro, and it was there that I developed an interest in Arctic skin clothing. After graduating from the BSc in 2008, I progressed onto the experimental archaeology masters at Exeter, and it was there that I started this particular strand of research. And that's the two images you've got in front on the screen at the moment. On the left is me stood in front of the first piece of rawhide I made, which was a complete Aberdeen Angus skin that I processed as part of my MA. Then I did a teaching qualification, took a year out, and then I progressed on to the PhD at the University of Bristol, where my thesis was titled The Processing and Use of Hides and Skin in Late Prehistoric Europe. So I finally graduated at the end of 2019, and the image on the right of the screen is my version of the Clonbrin Shield, which formed part of that PhD research. So this is the original Clonbrin Shield, recovered from a peat bog in Ireland in 1909. It's approximately 500 millimeters in diameter and between 4 and 5 millimeters thick. Has a central boss, that's this bit in the middle here, of between 80 and 100 millimeters in height. And then there's these 3 concentric rings. They're between 7 and 10 millimeters in height, and then between them sits these little sort of 3 groups of 3 button-like detail. And now the central boss allows for a handle behind so that the shield can be held, and details of this can be seen. If you see, there's little marks of stitching here. So just there are 3 sort of stitches that show where there's the handles stitched in on the other side, on the back side of the shield. This shield also has that additional boss, and you can see it there, look. So this is the boss at the center, and that's the additional stitching that holds this extra cup or boss in place. And that's actually laced on top. Now, this, if you look at it now, this could be seen as a reinforcement to protect the hand. However, this extra boss also covers a split in the boss of the one underneath. So this addition should really be seen as a repair. Now, today, the shield is quite flexible, almost floppy, and requires support to keep its shape. To keep its shape, where are we? Keep its shape. Thus, it would not really work as a shield in this state. However, as there's a handle across the boss at the back, that implies that originally it did not have such a support. And so the material must have been quite rigid. Now, whilst the shield is similar in size and design to bronze shields, it's obviously not metal or wood. And today the shield is a black glossy appearance, which obviously adds to the opinion that it is leather. Now, this shield has been reconstructed several times, first by John Coles, and this is John Coles, you can see him here. And this is his version of the Clonbrin Shield that he's holding. So that was in the late 60s, I believe it was, that he recreated it. Then it was recreated again in 2009 by a guy called Barry Malloy. And a guy down here in the southwest of Cornwall here, a guy called Neil Burridge, also makes a similar shield, all out of leather. Now, all have been successful in making these shields, as have numerous reenactors, but they've all made it using leather and have shaped and hardened it. They've experimented with a hot water and wax process, which recreates some sort of coeur boulet processing that is commonly believed to have been used on leather to make this shield originally. But it is this consistent belief that the shield is made from leather that first started me thinking. And this is important when we consider the environment that the shield was recovered from. It's an environment that has the potential to influence the original nature of a range of skin-based material. And when you really think about it, you know, if we're looking at bog bodies, so human remains, we don't define bog bodies as leather people, yet their remains have effectively been tanned. But yet all other skin-based artifacts, such as shoes, cloaks, hats, etc., are all termed as being made of leather. So on to the next one. So this is a guy called George Catlin. This painting was done by William Fisk, and it's on open source Wikipedia. So it's an image of George Catlin. He's an American who traveled across the Americas in the 1800s, writing, drawing and painting indigenous people. He wrote several books, one of which was illustrations of the manners, customs and condition of North American Indians. And he also wrote And Life Amongst the Indians. And it was whilst reading these ethnographic studies that I came across an image. So this is one of his paintings on the right here. And it was another one of these paintings, which I'm just going to get to in a minute, that made me think of the Clonbrin Shield and the method by which it had been made. So this painting is called Smoking the Shield, and he then starts to sort of, is referred to when the dance ceases and the fire is put out. So in his travels, Catlin observed diverse activities and customs. And this painting is of Sioux warriors. So we've got all these Sioux warriors here. It's a Sioux encampment. And as I said, it's called Smoking the Shield. Now it shows the warriors dancing and processing a piece of buffalo skin in order to make the war shield. Now, if we see in the center here, you've got a guy kneeling down, and he's kneeling around what looks like lots of tiny little stakes and a piece of flat something, which is the piece of skin, buffalo skin. Now, in his notes, Catlin states that the warrior who requires the shield calls his friends together to help, and that the shield is made of the skin of the buffalo's neck, hardened with the glue extracted from the hoofs and joints of some of the animals. He states that this skin is stretched and pegged over the coals from a fire, where it is allowed to shrink and thicken whilst members of the tribe sing and dance. Now, this Sioux shield made from the buffalo neck, that would be the thickest part of the skin of the hide. And it's this whole thing of everybody getting together, everybody singing and dancing, calling on their warrior gods to imbibe this shield with this strength. Now, if I think about this, I started to think, well, hang on a minute here. I've got a hide shield that's obviously tough and strong enough. And if we look at the weapons of indigenous people at this time, whilst they are obviously all still considered to be Stone Age technology, they're still going to be pretty strong. You know, a flint arrow, flint spearhead, you know, if they're making a shield that can put up with that sort of treatment, or mistreatment, I should say, this was why this whole process really rather intrigued me. Now, there was another guy, Dellenbaugh, in 1906, who also mentioned the heat shrinking and hardening of skin. And Dellenbaugh actually came out with a statement that he said that certain native Indian shields could turn a ball from a black powder gun. Now, it was this combination of producing a shield that was pretty robust, and the method by which they made this, i.e. the heating over hot stones or coals, that really rather intrigued me, because it was very, very different from the hot water and wax and the making of leather first, and then using hot water and wax to harden the shield that was commonly being proposed for the Clonbrin Shields manufacture. Because the making of leather is quite not a complicated, but it's quite a long-winded process. So this process of heating the skin over hot stones seemed to be much quicker and would give you an end result that was equally as good. So the other thing that really hit home when I was sort of researching this was how nicely this hot stone technology that was going on in the Americas would link really well to Ireland, in that in that there are a range of hot stone technology of burnt mounds, you know, the mounds of burnt stones, and there isn't a definitive reason for these mounds of burnt stones. There's a whole variety of reasons. So why, my thought process was saying, so why can making shields not be another one of those good reasons for it? So my curiosity was obviously aroused, and it was this whole combination of, would this new method provide a sound alternative to the use of leather and the cure boule technique? And could I make a shield that would hold up to being hit? So we're now looking at, this is the material. So we're starting off, top left here is a Simmental cow skin. And then this is the inside of the skin. And I've got this picture here, this large picture here, to show you the different layers of an animal skin. So on the left here, we've got the hair. And then on the right here, we've got the area that's called the grain. That's the outside of the skin that forms, when you've got a pair of leather shoes, that forms the shiny outside surface. And then this paler stripe down the middle is where the grain layer has been scraped away. Now, when I'm making the Clonbrin Shield, I don't want to scrape away this grain layer. I want this kept in situ. You would only scrape it away if you were maybe making something like buckskin, which has a soft, fluffy texture on both sides. So when first removed from the animal, the skin is obviously warm, but it quickly becomes cold and it's wet and slippery and often a little smelly. And all this, when combined with the weight, makes it quite cumbersome to handle. And I would say that it probably, this Simmental skin, well, no, if we go back to the rawhide image of me stood by a huge, great big frame of a image of a raw piece of rawhide, that was an Aberdeen Angus cross cow, and it took 2 of us to lift that skin in a bag when it was first off the animal. So once you get the fat off, obviously it gets a little lighter. So when a hide is in this wet state, it's called green, and it's only then you've got a green hide, and then you start to process it. So these pictures here are the thicknesses of the neck area of that Simmental. So you can see how thick the sort of fatty hump neck area is in comparison to just further down. But even this is nigh on a centimetre thick. So now we've got to start to prepare the skin. So we need to do, oh no, go back. Preparing the skin. So here we are up here. So to prepare a skin, some hide for making a shield, you might want to leave the hair on or take the hair off. So some hide shields, for example, Zulu shields, have their hair left in place, but the Clonbrin Shield does not. So there are several ways in which the hair can be removed. If the carcass is left intact, then the hair naturally falls away, but the skin itself also degrades as the animal decomposes. But we need the outer grain layer to stay on the skin and form the smooth surface of the shield. So what was needed was obviously a gentler method that would not damage the grain. So dehairing needed to be carried out, and one method is to place the skin in a slow flowing stream or river, and this allows the skin to start to decompose, and the water simply takes the hair away as soon as the follicles have loosened their hold. But sadly, I don't have a stream. So another method was to simply roll the skin and leave it to decompose in the sun a little bit, couple of days like that, until the hair starts to fall out. But my family wouldn't let me do that, as it may become rather smelly. So the next method, and the method I predominantly used, is to buck the skin. Now the image on the top left is a paste. It's made from wood ash, and that is spread all over the hair side of the skin, and then the skin is left to soak in a solution of that wood ash. Now this causes the skin to plump up, to swell, and the follicles to open up, and the hair is then released. And removing the hair is simply by rubbing the skin and pulling it out. And you can see me doing this here. It's one of the few times I wear rubber gloves when I'm working. I don't like wearing them because they're a bit cumbersome, but when it comes to bucking, it's quite a sort of caustic solution, so it's a good idea to wear the gloves then. And you can almost peel, as you can see I'm doing here, peel the hair away. So once you've taken all the hair off the skin, the next thing is to flesh it, and this you can see is the very inside, the very fatty layer, and then this here is the inner membrane of the skin, and when you clean that away, you're left with a nice the nice sort of inside or flesh side of the skin inside. So let's see, once the fat is removed, the skin is washed and it's ready for heat treating. It's important that the skin is kept wet and flat during this time, as if it becomes crumpled or folded, then it tends to stick together. And if it's allowed to dry like that, then you'll basically end up with a bundle of dry skin, which is unusable rather than a flat sheet of material. So preparing the skin. So I've got a couple more pictures of fleshing here. Ah, there we go. So you can see where the fat has been taken away and it's nice and clean underneath. So heat treating with your tribe, if we go back to Catlin's picture, here they all are doing that. And so what I did is I cut a hole in the ground, I gathered my hot stones and I made a load of stakes. And you can see this is a piece of hide here that's been pegged out over the pit of hot stones. And there's sort of, you can see all the steam rising. Now this is all very well and good, but it's basically me on my own. I don't have a tribe, and whilst my family are brilliant at bringing me mugs of tea, they don't particularly want to get involved in this. I have no idea why. So this is another piece, and you can see this one stake just pinned here out over the hot coals. Now this is all very well, as I've said, but without a tribe, the pegs, because you're heating the skin shrinks and it pulls the pegs out, and so you need your half a dozen people around it to help put those pegs back in. Otherwise the skin tends to fall on the hot stones and you end up with burnt bits. So I heat treat on my own, hence why I put everything into a frame, and this frame is then put over the hot stones. This is my trusty dog that was always in good attendance, bless him, whenever I was working. I wonder why. And you can see that what I did was laced the skin into the frame, and what I started it off very loose, so it's very saggy, and hopefully with the hope that that would, as it shrank, the strings would tighten and hopefully not snap at all. So temperatures were between 124 and 182 degrees C were recorded over this. So this is sort of the view from underneath. So I've got a mixture of coals and hot stones in there, and you can see the underside of the skin. And again, here you can see the steam rising from through from the piece of material, the piece of skin. Now, I didn't make up a paste of hoof and horn and bone, and that's actually something that I need to be looking at really. But because I would like to rerun these trials again and add that into the skin as it's being heated, but I would tend to just splash the skin with water to sort of slow its heating down. So the next slide. Now we're looking at shaping the skin to make the shield, and luckily for me, not only has the Clonbrin Shield been recovered from a peat bog, but also this particular item, which everybody is of the opinion is a mould for this style of shield. Now, whether this mould was used for skin-based shields or whether this mould was used for bronze shields, nobody obviously knows. But from my perspective, it was obviously quite useful to go down this road of now I have to make a mould. So this is the start of my mould. I couldn't get one whole piece of wood, and I'm working on that. Hopefully be able to get a nice circular round of tree trunk and remake my mould. But this is just two halves, two pieces. I carved the boss out of the middle and obviously the 3 consecutive rings. I didn't put in the little button sort of detail. This was sort of trial and error. I'm not that good a carpenter yet, and I felt it was just a bit too fiddly for me to start off with. So if we then go on to this, so this is one of the pictures of the skin having been put into the mould, and one of the discussions I had with the guys at the National Museum of Dublin, and they're the people that hold the original shield and the mould, is how were these rings made? How was the boss shaped? So I found a stone, a pebble you can see in the middle here, that pushes down into the boss, and I used rope to shape that a bit more. The hoops here, I've tried sort of 3, because I made a total of 4 of these shields. 3 relatively well, 2 relatively successfully, 1 very successfully, and 1 completely unsuccessful. So not a bad mix really. But I started off by trying to shape the ridges by using willow, and looped them into sort of hoops of willow to push down into the grooves as I was putting the skin in place. And again, this is another time when you know, I was working, I just had my husband who sort of knew what I wanted him to do, but wasn't as completely 100% au fait with where we were going with it. And so the whole sort of procedure was a bit cumbersome. And I think that working with a tribe, working with your group of people, this sort of thing would be very a lot more fluidly made, a lot easier. The problem was things like holding the willow hoops in place, because you push the skin down into the grooves and it was soft, it was flexible, it would just pop out again, trying to hold the willow in place while the piece of wood was put on top. You know, it was sort of popping out. It's quite a sort of, you needed 6 hands, let alone an extra hand. So and the skin is quite thick and quite heavy. After heating, it goes very rubbery. So when the first shield was made, the willow stems were used to form the ridges, and it was difficult as they didn't really stay in the grooves. And so everything was sort of put in place, held down. And if we go to the next picture, yeah, you can see big lump of wood on top and a big rock to hold it all in place. So this was the first one I made. And this is the sort of extra skin that I didn't actually cut off at the time. And that was a definite mistake. So if we then look at my next picture, so this was actually the last shield I made, and this is as the mold has been, as the planks have been taken off. So I've taken away the willow and gone for rope for absolutely everything to make the ridges. And when this one was open, it had that very sort of soft white mold over it. But once it had aired for a couple of days, this was just dusted off and easy to remove. So you can see that once the rope's been taken away, you can see these ridges have been formed really quite well. One more picture, that's the boss. You can see the central, they leave quite an impression on the shield, and that impression is still there today. So this is the face of the shield. When, as I said, so it's got that dusting of a white mould over it, but once it had been aired for a couple of days, that just rubbed off and was no problem at all. When this was first released from the mould, the shield was slightly floppy. Again, it was that sort of rubbery, gelatinous. You couldn't have picked the shield up and rolled it into a tube, but it was not rigid. So, however, the fact that it was soft meant that making the holes, which I needed to do on either side of the central boss, was quite easy, because the previous shields I'd made, I'd left it too long before I'd started to do that, and I couldn't actually put any holes for fixing of the handle on them. So the rope, again, you can see the imprint round here, and I've been trying to look at the original pictures I've got of the original Clonbrin Shield to see if there's any evidence of that sort of thing on that shield. Sorry, excuse me, I'm just going to blow my nose. So between making these shields, I enlarged the grooves that make the consecutive rings between the first and the second shield, because I quickly learned that they were definitely not big enough to hold the willow and that sort of thing. So I enlarged that, and I enlarged the boss a little bit as well, because I realized after making the first one that there wouldn't be enough room for me to have my hand inside it. And I think that the next stage I want to do when I can make a new shield mold is actually to make a wooden sort of domed plug to act as the inside of the boss rather than the pebble and rope scenario. So you can see from this the sort of thickness of the shield. That was the other thing on that first one. If I go back to there, you can see all of this is still hanging over. And when I came to cutting that away, it was very difficult because it was so hard. It had really toughened up. And because I was trying to keep all of the processing technology to be as close to prehistoric as I could, you know, I tried cutting it with flint. There's absolutely no way flint will go through this stuff when it's hardened. I didn't at the time have a decent bronze knife that would have cut it, but even with an ordinary metal knife, you know, a survival, my sort of woodcraft knife, that really doesn't want to cut it when it's this hard. And to get rid of the excess around this particular shield, I actually ended up using a jigsaw, a mechanical jigsaw. So it's incredibly tough. Let's go back through again. So here we are, and you can see the height of the boss. So the rope has been successful to form the ridges, and you'll see in better pictures, although you can see just back here the two ridges there. And I'd definitely like to make the mould have a bigger rings so that I could perhaps go back to the trialing the willow. And the boss, as I've said, I'd like to make a wooden boss to sit inside. So these are my, I'm going to show you all of the shields I've made now. So this one is that first shield. You can see I didn't quite have enough of the skin to set it right in the mould. As I said, I was working on my own. It was very much trial and error like this, but I've managed to successfully put one loop, one hoop in. Just here, I don't know if you can notice, there's a tiny little, well, it's about 8 centimeters or so, a rip in the skin, and that actually looks very, very similar to a split on the original shield, which was quite interesting. So you can see here, this is where the skin has shrunk and it was tied when it was heating. And this is one of the ones that actually the skin itself puckered quite a bit. So this is shield number 2. And it still keeps this sort of, it's dried in this flexed way. This is where you can see there's a rip there. But again, the 3 consecutive rings have been formed really quite well there. This is the shield that was sadly unsuccessful. And when I was bucking this one, I had to leave this particular piece of skin in water in the solution. Well, I bucked it, took all the hair off of it, and then I had to, I washed it, and I usually leave them overnight because I finish working at the end of the day and just leave them overnight in the water. Well, unfortunately with this one, I had about 3 days of really bad weather, so I couldn't heat treat it the next day. And consequently, this stayed in water for about 3 days, I think, maybe 4 days. And when it came to heating it, I wonder whether it overcooked almost, because it quickly, you can see all over here, there's very different color skin to over here, and this is almost crystallized and became very brittle. So I lifted that one and tried to put it in the mold, but it didn't take very much manipulation for this crack. And so that was my one fail. Now this is the back of my most successful shield. And you can see where I've got the ties for the handle that goes across it, and the ridges. You can see the back side of the ridges quite clearly. And this is again the front side of it. If I go to, so that's the 3 together. So the first one that had to be cut using a jigsaw. No, this is the middle one's the first one, sorry, that had to be cut using a jigsaw. The second one I trimmed off when it was damp and I put it into the mold. And the third one I trimmed off a lot tighter, because this one, as you can see, has almost ended up with a ridge around it, which obviously would add to its rigidity. So obviously the whole thing about a shield is it fit for purpose? And a shield is an offensive as well as a defensive. You know, a lot of people go, oh, a shield's just used for defense. But actually it's used for, it's an offensive weapon as well as a defensive weapon. Now, in order to trial that, I obviously have to fight with it against certain weapons and again. So we looked at that, and the start off with the whole sort of flint scenario, so flint arrowhead. And when it's shot at, an arrow will go through one of the shields. I didn't use my fourth shield for this. I used the third shield for these tests. And a piece of flint will go through the skin, but it's not ripped through it and allowed the shield to sort of splinter into pieces. It's stuck. And in some respects, this is not a lot of difference to what would happen if you had a piece of wood there. A piece of flint would go into that. So I was quite pleased with that. If you take a piece of flint and try and scratch it, that's the sort of marks you get. It's still quite a tough material. This is a bronze sword, and that actually bent when we sort of stabbed the shield or the heat treated skin with it. And then the same shield sword rather was used to hit it. Now this is a bronze sword made by Neil Burridge, who's a bronzesmith down this way. You know, when you hit the shield, it flexes a little bit, but it certainly doesn't buckle. These two pictures, you know, this sword is hitting it edge on and across the boss, and this is hitting over on this side. It's hitting the rim of the shield, and the shield itself flexes, which is good. You're talking about it absorbing the blow rather than bending. And one of the things that has come up with other researchers' work using a leather shield that goes through a Kerboulé process, they noted that repetitive hitting of this shield, of their shields, caused the leather to eventually start to bend and flex, which meant that if you'd have continued that, the shield would have eventually sort of broken down almost. So these leather shields was almost folding back on the person holding it. So it's got the handle on the back, you can see here, and a piece of sheepskin just to give a bit of cushioning behind when it was hit. Now, so this shield, when it was struck all along the ridge edge, you can see the damage that it's occurring, but it's not cutting in. In fact, actually, if I come over here, can you see that there's a little couple of 3 or 4 little lines of notches just there? I wonder if I can use that one. There. Oh, yes, that's quite handy, isn't it? Sorry. So back to there, and then go like that. There's some of the notches that is made by the shield hitting it. Now, there are a couple of other scratches on the face of it, but it's not got horrendous sort of slash cut type damage to it. The original shield has a couple of scratches across it, but nothing dramatic. And you can see where it's not bending even when it's hit on this outer edge. Now, Ryan, when he advertised this, had a nifty little picture of a gun shooting. Now, as I said right at the beginning, one of the references by Denenbaugh, I think it was, Dellenbaugh, yeah, was that the shield could turn a bullet from a black powder gun. Now, I've yet to trial that, but I certainly would like to do so. But what we did do is we used different piece of this heat treated material as a bit of target practice, but using an air rifle. Now, whilst an air rifle is not majorly powerful in comparison to a black powder gun, we've got sports air rifles, which are a little bit above an ordinary air rifle. And, you know, my son shot at this particular piece, and you can see 1, 2, 3 marks there. It's not shattering, it's not going straight through the material, which is quite an important aspect of it. And it would be good to do some more research on this to see how they go. But it was primarily against a bladed weapon like a bronze sword, because this is the sort of date that they've put on the Clonbrin Shield as sort of late bronze, early Iron Age. So where are we? I think we're nearly done. I hope I'm all right on time. So this last is the quote from Catlin in Letters and Notes, and it sort of talks about, you know, the buffalo neck. Well, I showed you a piece of just ordinary Simmental cow rather than buffalo, and that was a good sort of 8 centimeters, and I know that buffalo neck is a good 10 to 12 centimeters. And it's hardened with this glue that's extracted from hoofs and joints of the same animal. And it's certainly no reason at all why, from a prehistoric perspective, they weren't making a glue of a similar nature, perhaps to help harden the skin. And certainly there's absolutely no reason why they wouldn't have used the neck area of the animal to make the Clonbrin Shield. And there isn't actually any way of telling whereabouts on the animal that piece of skin originated from. But it would seem quite sensible to when you have your animal skin, your cow skin, to choose the thickest area. Now, from a Sioux perspective, and Catlin noted, the skin is at first twice as large as the size required of the shield. And I found that it shrinks quite considerably, and it can shrink quite quickly to start off with. So in the first 5-10 minutes, it really does shrink. Now, from a Sioux perspective, he had his friends to dance and sing around the shield and solicit the Great Spirit to install in it the power to protect him and harness harmless against his enemies. Now, you maybe only want to be singing and dancing for 10 minutes, which would be the shrinkage time. But this curious process is most dexterously done, and the fact that it's a group of people doing this in any one time makes it, the tribal aspect of it makes it a community protecting of this warrior. So I think that's quite an interesting thought. It sort of brings agency into the material culture as well. So I'm pretty much there now. I've got my references or further reading slides, and I'm more than happy to chat to people. So I can go backwards and forwards through the slides if you would like me to, if there's anywhere you particularly want to look at. So those are my references or further reading, and there's some good stuff there. The Malloy, Barry Malloy, 2009, For Gods of Men. That's the look at Bronze Age shields, and it was actually him who also made a reproduction of this particular shield. And that's me. I'm based in Cornwall, and that's us done, I think. Let's go back.
Amazing.
3.
Amazing.
How are we, Ryan, on time?
Time with we're at 5 to 8. Depends for you. I'm okay to go a bit over.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to sit here. Quite happy. I'm just zapping back through everything else.
Cool.
Yeah, whatever is easiest for you guys.
Amazing. Cool. That was really good, Sally. So I think we're going to go into a Q&A now. If anyone's got any burning questions, you can put them in the chat or shout them out. My first one is to so you mentioned the black powder with the gun.
Yeah.
Is that something you're planning to do somewhere in the near future?
I'd like to. I think really and truly I need to get myself another mould sorted out. Then I could maybe make a couple more shields, because the one I've got, the best one I've got, which I can show you guys, more than happy. Shall I stop sharing my screen for a brief moment, and then I can, hi Nigel, so I can bring the shield out. There it is. And I'm kind of like, I don't want to shoot it just in case I put a hole in it.
No.
So, but I have other ones, but it would equally be quite good to do several more and then to trial, because it's a difficult one. You've got so many variables. You've got the variable of different animals, different skins, different areas on the skin, different amounts of heat. This is another piece. This was an offcut. All right, I'll bring these into class tomorrow.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I just hung it over a piece of wood in the shed, all right, when it was wet, and it just dried like this. And you can't, if you want to open it, you are talking about probably having to snap it. And I've hit it. Let's see, you can see I hit it with sharp things every now and then, and it bounces. So you could see how basic armor could have been made, bits for arms and legs. Whether this would take being shot at, I don't know. But yeah, it's something I'd like to do.
Any questions, Nigel? Have you got any? You're on mute. I think. No, you're not on mute.
Semaphore. Do you need semaphore?
Yeah.
That's it. You're unmuted now.
It says you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. No, nothing's coming through. We can see you.
Typing.
Yeah, try typing in. Try typing something in, because it's not. Your mic doesn't seem to be working for some reason.
I've got nowhere showing me where there's there. If I click on the chat, that might.
So I do have a question about the Clonbrin Shield.
Yes.
Do they know it was? Has it actually been confirmed that it's is it cow leather?
Well, this is the trouble. Everything that goes in a bog is effectively tanned, so you can't. So it is leather now. It's just, was it leather when it went into the bog? You see what I mean? Because, if we take Pete Bogman or any of the bog people, they are effectively leather people. But we know there wasn't a tribe of leather people, you know, we know that that wasn't that's, you know, they were human beings that fell in the bog, whether they were pushed, shoved, sacrificed, or fell drunk on the way home from the pub, you know, but we know they were people. But effectively, we don't know the original nature of the Clonbrin Shield prior to somebody going, oh damn, I'm fed up with this thing, I'm flinging it in, or offering it. We don't know if it was an offering, or whether it was you know, dropped in the bog as the guy was running away after losing his fight, or you know what I mean, is we're lucky to have it, as with a lot of the bog stuff, you know. And with my other research that went with the PhD, where I had different animal skin that I then buried, you can't tell the difference between after it's been in a bog for 13 months, it's very, very difficult to tell the difference between buckskin and rawhide. So yet when you put buckskin and rawhide next to each other, I think I showed you some pictures last week. Were you there when I was showing pictures last week? And the buckskin has a very distinctive look, and the rawhide is very, very different. I'll bring some up next, you know, tomorrow if you want, but you know, they're very different materials when you look at them under a microscope, but once they've been in a bog for 13 months, you can't tell the you know, it's very, very, so 100, 200, 300,000 years or whatever is gonna be pretty impossible to tell the difference.
When you do have it under the microscope, can you tell the difference between different animals quite easily?
Now, if you've got if you take the picture of the grain side, so the outsides of an animal skin, you can tell the difference when they've made leather, because you still see the hair follicles, and hair follicles on different animals have different patterns. So you can tell pig skin, and you can tell cow skin, and you can tell deer. You can, I believe, tell different cats and fur-bearing animals by the same method, because that's how they're starting to catch illegal fur traders out. You know, somebody's bringing something in a country that's had a false dye put, you know, a dye put on it, and they're saying, oh, this is so-and-so cat, which is not endangered. But when they look at the hair follicle pattern, they're seeing that actually, no, it's a so-and-so ocelot, twice removed snow leopard or whatever. And that's showing that the pattern's very different. So you can tell the difference that way. But whether you could, and in fact, effectively, yes, you could still tell the difference if it had been in a peat bog, because it's hair follicle pattern that's important, not whether it's been tanned or made into leather. Do you see what I mean?
If it was like well, you mentioned the process of where you get what's it called? Is it buckskin?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so would there still be a hair follicle pattern there?
No.
So
you scrape the grain off of them. I can see what I'm going to have to do for you guys is bring in a collection of skins and show you all the different skins. I think that's the way to do it, because the buckskin. Oh, right. So, you know, suede has that slightly fluffiness on the inside and the outside. The inside's flesh side, outside. Well, suede has had the grain removed. So that's that fluffy both sides. Then, and buckskin is the same. The shiny grain's removed and it's soaked in brain, and then it's manipulated, and that's how you make buckskin. And then eventually when it's dry, you can then smoke it, and so you get this very soft, fluffy material that is warm. It's exquisite material, buckskin. It's lush. It really is, you know, and that's fluffy both sides.
Amazing. Nigel, I noticed you changed your headset.
I have. Can you hear me?
Yes, it's working.
Hello.
Amazing.
Good evening. My apologies for being
That's
late.
all right.
I was on an errand and missed the construction bit. But why hide? Why not wood?
Oh, I see. What, as in a shield?
The shield itself, yeah. Obviously, you know, later versions obviously went on to wood. Is it necessity? It's a lot of work to go to. And I know they use hides for everything, obviously the TP style and the etc. And I just wondered on well, you go
from a Native American perspective, you know, there's a whole variety of shields made out of animal skin, of hide. So it's light for starters.
Yes.
I mean, this is no weight at all.
No, I realise that.
And you start looking at sort of the wooden equivalent. You couldn't get something that thin.
No.
You know?
No. Willow's not going to do it. It's going to be a 2-layer system, isn't it?
Yeah. And I just think that, quite frankly, I think the problem with this is I don't know how well it's going to do if I left it out in the rain.
That was some question I was going to come to when when you were showing the wrapped piece a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
And the question was, or I was going to say, was having got it to that shape, can you then reshape it, or do you have to steam it, or do something?
I don't know. I haven't played with it that much.
Experimental time again. Understood. Now,
from my perspective, I know that if I left a couple of pieces out in the yard, they tend to go a bit rubbery and gelatinous, and then
it's like the dog chews, isn't it?
Yeah,
very similar. The other thing is, I wondered at this, and I don't know whether anyone's asked it, but you say it's from buffalo neck.
Yeah,
the original from buffalo neck. Obviously, the rest of the buffalo is quite precious due to the fur system, for his back and everything. Presumably, the neck coming down is the bit that's cut away anyway.
Well, I'm buffalo robes.
Yes,
effectively that you could take sort of a 2-foot piece off of, like you say, the neck hump, and yet still have the rest of your buffalo robe quite nicely.
Yes.
There's a bison farm up in Wiltshire.
That's right. Yeah.
And I've sort of get round to going up to there, because you can get hides from them.
Oh wow.
And you can get if you contact them enough in advance, you can get wet hides, a green hide, and that's ultimately that would be really nice to work with.
There's no equivalent, I'm presuming, that the fact that the buffalo hide itself is it a bare neck? Is it or is it a furred neck?
It's a furred neck.
It is a furred neck.
It's a furred neck, but for making a shield, you'd still have to take that off.
You've got to take that off, yeah.
Yeah.
Question on that, though. African style, they don't take the fur off.
No, Zulu shields in particular.
That's what I'm going to, yeah.
The patterning on a Zulu shield is very, very important. Right, I'm with you. Because if you can imagine, that they've surrounded Isandlwana, Rorke's Drift, they're on the ridges. Certain groups of warrior had certain colour shields.
Yes, I've seen this. They had armies, basically.
Yeah.
The Zulu were armies.
Definitely.
Of different areas.
Yeah.
And different weapons as well, I believe.
Yeah. And their shields, so certain like the young, newer, less experienced warrior had, say, red and white on their shield. The real sort of high-ranking, totally been there for years warrior maybe had an all-black shield. That I'm just saying that off the top of my head. I know that there was a difference, you know. That's how they could see who was who, which group were doing what, you know. I'm trying to think. I know my Jack might have the answer to the exactness of that. I'll give him a shout later and see what I can find out tomorrow. I've got a couple of books on Zulu stuff, so
a couple of other bits. I do, you know, so I get a tree trunk at some point.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
When you're on about the mould, the bit I missed, and I did say it, how many times can that be used? Because,
well, I've used it 4 times. You're not burning in it. Your piece of skin, whilst being quite hot to handle, you know, you're sort of getting it in, isn't hot enough to burn that mould, as far as I'm concerned. Once I've got one mould up and running, I don't see why I would need to make another mould.
No, I'm just wondering about the durability as to opposed to, you know, why they didn't, you know, scrape out circles in rock and, you know, do you know what I mean?
I don't know. Maybe there is
plenty of that over there as well.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. I think from the Irish perspective, from the Clonbrin Shield perspective, you know, we've only got that one mould.
That's the next question.
Yeah. Only got the one mould.
One mould and how many shields? One
shield.
Now the question, because I missed this bit, are they from the same point?
I don't think they're from, I'm not sure if they're from the same area or not. I'd have to look that one up, find out.
Because it's quite a special thing to do. So were they doing other things in rawhide?
I see what you mean.
Containers and everything else, were they being used? You know?
Yeah, I mean, shoes for starters, hide shoes are a definite. And I mean, right up until the 1900s, the Irish were wearing a shoe called the pamputi, which basically starts off as a elongated D shape, folded, and a couple of stitches put up your heel, and then the whole lot sort of pulled in across your toe. And I've got a pair of pamputis that I made, but I made rawhide first, and then I made the rawhide into pamputi. But I believe really earlier on, sort of 1700s, the pamputi was a piece of wet hide, so a piece of green hide that was tied round the foot, and that became rawhide by the fact that it just dried, because that's all rawhide is an animal skin.
The same as getting your boots nowadays, and then you go and stand in a deep puddle and let them dry around you to mould your feet. That's the proper way of, you know, doing it.
That was the thing,
people
wasn't
know
it?
That nowadays, but I still do. You know, you get them wet, and then you boot them and polish them up afterwards once you've soaked them and done them. But
I mean, from my perspective, I made the rawhide first and then made the shoes. And I would wear them around the house. I would wear them up and down the road to the post office.
Yes,
It does look a bit like I'm wearing 2 hamsters.
I know what you mean.
Oh, sorry, guinea pigs. It makes it look like I've just stuck my foot in a couple of guinea pigs and walked around. And people are sort of like, every now and then I would wear them down to the post office, and you'd see people glance at me and then sort of like, look away. Yes, right. Okay, that's just Sally.
Yeah, that's right. It's just up there.
What I was doing there was, that was part of the sort of research, was trialing to see how comfortable they were and whether they rubbed at different points on my foot, and things like that, and equally how warm they were, and having you know, over the years, having done a lot of living history where you're on a site for a week and it's been raining for the week prior to you getting to that site, and so you've set up camp and you're thinking, if I wear my medieval shoes now,
don't go there.
They're going to be wet within 10 minutes. They're going to be clagged in mud.
Lockswood last year.
Yeah, what's the point? You're actually better off going barefoot.
That was Lockswood last year.
Yeah, because you're better off just going barefoot and drying your feet every night before you go to bed than you are trying to dry, because you can't dry a pair of leather shoes out overnight. You know, but it just doesn't happen.
The case? I don't know whether Ryan has any input on this, but I have a feeling that many years ago you only wore shoes when your feet were in danger of being damaged by whatever you're walking on.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're normally walking on grass, you had no reason to wear rawhide or anything else.
Or any shoe.
At that point, until you come to the, I don't know, the shale deposits down the side or a rocky beach or something like that, where you're going to get lacerated, and you know, obviously back then probably even more so.
Yeah. And certainly the research I've done on pamputis, there was talk of cutting the skin so that the instep of the foot is over the backbone, so the hair points one way for your toes and points the other way for your heels, which would give you grip on slippery surfaces. So that was quite an interesting one. I found that was quite a good one. But you're right. I mean, if we take off, the fact that I've got on my pamputis, I've got some bare patches because I've been walking up and down the road.
Yes.
You know, and it's worn them out. If I'd have only worn them in the garden, on the grass, why would I have needed to? I think you're right. You wear them when you're doing the not sand loping, you know, when you're doing the collection of seafood across the rocks, because you want that little bit of extra between you and...
That's right. You know, the sharp, you know, pumice rock or whatever it is. I've done that abroad. You know, walked on the rocks and then thought I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
You know, so you know that is a thing that, you know, that those were made, and having made a pair, there's quite a bit of making to them as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
well, no, a pamputi is really, really simple. We're gonna have to work. I'll chat with Craddock tomorrow to work a time when I can just bring everything in and give you guys a real good session of different skins and hides and my prehistoric tools, and I can go through the conversations of all of the different processings as well, and that sort of stuff.
One thing on advancing into medieval, a lot of the plated armor, leather plated, is boiled leather. Not raw, not hide. I don't know.
But the trouble is, you see,
boiled leather.
The trouble is you then have to make leather.
Yes.
So you're talking of from the perspective, you know, from my research, the reason we have leather in the country today is because the Romans brought leather across Europe, and the reason they brought it is because they used, or rather they required, a material that was consistent, that was guaranteed, that was the same everywhere, because it went through that recognized process. So it goes through the process of tanning. Now that is very, very different to everything I do. You still have to remove the hair, you still have to remove the fat, but then the skin is soaked for however long in I mean, today the tannery in South Devon do oak bark tannery, and they soak a skin for making the sole leather for shoes, and they do a lot of saddlery leather as well. But there's leather, the leather they use for the shoes, that takes 12 months plus to tan that good enough.
I have seen a documentary on that one,
yeah. So from a Roman perspective, you have an infrastructure that is able to do that manufacturing process that then gives them material that means for every leather tent they make, whether that leather tent is made in Brittany or Italy, it's the same, because the process is the same. So they know that their soldiers sleeping in it are going to be protected in the same way. It's that need of a manufactured uniformity. Exactly. Now, if you then flip that to prehistory, from a prehistoric perspective, if in much the same way as in Inuit culture and Native American culture and Siberian and some of the African stuff, each community made their own, processed their own hides and skins. Some of them had a tweak where they might use a particular plant that grew in their area in the process that they thought did something. Somebody else might use a berry or a leaf pulp or something. Do you see what I mean? They would have their nuances of production, but
valley for valley.
Exactly. But none of them were particularly producing a uniformed material like leather. And then once you've got the leather, then you cœur brûlée it. So that's where you start to get to be able to shape it. You soak it in hot water, you add beeswax, and that was the other thing. All of the previous Clonbrin shields have been reproduced using that cœur brûlée process and using beeswax to harden it. Well, I consider that beeswax is quite an expensive, well, it's not expensive in the same way as financially, but it's quite an important product, because although it's there's not masses of it. Do you know what I mean?
Beeswax more so than tallow or anything like that?
Well, yeah, you know, maybe tallow's a little bit easier, I suppose, to get a hold of.
Well, that's what
yeah, you know. But the process I use, this heat treating, doesn't need any of that. Doesn't need tallow, and it doesn't need beeswax. You know.
Interesting. Thank you. Sorry, I missed the first bit.
That's all right. No problem.
We have gone quite a bit over. Is there any more questions, Nigel? I've got one more.
No, carry on, please.
Okay, here's my last question. So, do you have any future plans for the future? Any nice future projects?
Right. Yeah, I'd like to do some more of the hide processing, most definitely, because I've sort of stalled on that a bit. And to make a couple more shields would be really good, to then be able to play with different weapons. And to maybe have a couple of shields going so that prehistorically I could get another bronze. I've only got one bronze sword, so I probably need another one, and do some fight stuff with it, because I think it would work really, really well, to see how it works. A guy did say something about polishing the shield with fat, because it's quite a yellowy amber looking at the moment, and he wondered if it was polished, whether it wouldn't have a shine a bit like the bronze shields. So that could be quite interesting. Hide processing wise, there's definitely a need to do more of that. And then the other side of the PhD work that I did is burying stuff in bog scenarios. I need to do some more of that to widen that research. And it's whether I create, how I create the bog environment in a sustainable way that allows me to get the stuff out rather than the luck I had last time, you know.
A step garden with a wall in between.
Yeah,
you need a step down.
It's either that or it's do I get
or a pit.
Yeah, I was thinking of a pit. I've been thinking of sort of barrels and layering in barrels, and I'm not sure how the temperature might change, you know, barrels in the back garden.
Has to be a buried barrel.
Yeah, do I bury it and all of that, or do I put it in a box that then is insulated and put in the coolest part of my garden? I've got a particular corner that never really gets the sun, you know. That's the difficult thing. Obviously I need a lottery win, and then I could set up an experimental archaeology centre. Job
All
done.
right. Sweet.
I did have one question.
Oh, go on then.
Sorry, your mould, obviously the trunk, you know, and carved out, set on. Do you think they had a stack of them?
Could have done quite easily.
Because if you're going to cut one,
yeah,
you're probably going to cut more,
Yeah.
because you've got to create that first stump in the first place, haven't you?
Yeah. And the trouble is with that, by its very nature, is, you know, if it splits, well, it just becomes firewood then, doesn't it? You know, it's no big deal.
It does, but actually, Bronze Age, taking a tree down doesn't involve going all the way across it.
No.
So that had to be totally shaped from the beginning, and more so than chainsaw straight through.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not a natural.
Did you see the mould?
I very briefly on your thing, like
yeah.
But, you know, you normally Rhonda, you would hack that way, and possibly that way, so you veer it, not straight through, you know.
Yeah.
So that's got to be created, which I find interesting, you know, that to create that. I know how difficult it is to create that edge. You know, it's bad enough with a chainsaw and a axe, let alone a stone piece of kit, or you know.
Yeah.
So I just wondered what went into that part of the.
Well, that's it. From a mould perspective, they don't know. You know,
No.
It's the one, they've got that one wooden mould, and the one skin-based material, as I call it, shield. And they've got a wooden shield. Actually, they have got a wooden shield as well. I've got images of that one because I saw that one when I went to Dublin as well.
Yeah.
But that, you would not want to be fighting with that wooden shield. It was like a flipping barn door.
It was a shield wall then, isn't it?
It was big. It was
it's a
thick.
protector, isn't it?
It was, you know.
But there are shields for different uses. Obviously, one's a hunting shield. That is very similar to, say, a housecarl's shield, possibly, where you're going to stand and you're going to set yourself, and defensive shield.
Yeah, I mean, and this is also, you know, the whole nature of fighting, the whole discussion about warfare. All of this sort of, you know, was it, guy, you know, we'll send our best guy out, you send your best guy in, kind of scenario? How did it work? We're just not, you know, we're still learning all about that sort of scenario, you know. It's
shield isn't a weapon in itself.
This one could be. You would not want to get a shield across the nose. This one.
It's still capable of doing that, is it? Yeah.
Oh, God,
No, that's all right. That's all right. I just wondered that,
the original isn't, because the original is gone all soft and floppy.
Yeah, I can understand that.
But this one,
right.
you wouldn't want to catch this one across the nose.
Still, even if it's floppy, it's still a way of protecting your hand.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can still like if it is
Bash
possible-
You've still got
things.
a punch, yeah.
Yeah.
You've still got a boss
Yeah.
on that front. That's quite a big, quite a decent sized boss in the middle,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. That.
Cool.
All right.
Very good discussion. I'm going to stop recording now. So I'm just going to say thank you everyone for watching this later potentially, and thank you very much, Sally, for coming here and doing this. Ran
No
quite a bit
problem
over.
at all. No
Thank you
problem
very
at
much.
all.
Thank you.
And email me or just give me a shout for questions. No problem.